What it do? Dream Team, it's your boy Neal back with another reaction video, guys. Here we are with why Australia's gun laws wouldn't work in the US. ABC News. Before we dive in, make sure you guys subscribe to the channel, ring notification bell, get a video a thumbs up so it gets suggested. If you guys have a favorite video suggestion, you can subscribe to Patreon or drop it in the comment section. But yeah, after seeing Australia's gun laws and hearing what they did after that massacre that they had and the gun buyback policy and the reform laws, I'm not sure. But it seemed like they did an absolutely incredible job, that they had an incredible response into, you know what I'm saying, to a massacre happening, to a mass shooting happening. And it just seems like here in America, we don't take that approach. I don't know why. But I haven't studied up on. I know two completely different countries, much different population, much larger population in the U.S. We are completely different. But my thing is, I don't know why we haven't tried the way Australia did it, because it seemed to really work for them. And now it is much more difficult to get a gun in Australia than it is in the U.S., which I feel like, I mean, it should be difficult to get your hands on a gun, point blank period, because of all the gun crime, because of all the homicides, because of all the suicides by gun, and all of these different things. And so, but I'm intrigued to hear about why Australia gun laws wouldn't work in the U.S. and see if I agree with it or not. Oh, I didn't mean to mute it. My bad. Might have did something else too. Yep. Alright, let's get it.
Australia was generally pretty relaxed about guns.
Do you notice anything unusual or different about me? You're looking very nice today. Your haircut.
Fast forward 19 years and it's a different story.
Oh, dang.
You're looking very nice today. Your haircut.
Fast forward 19 years and it's a different story. It was and still is the worst mass shooting in Australian history. Less than 2 weeks after the Port Arthur massacre, the Prime Minister at the time rallied the 8 states and territories together to push through strict gun laws and a gun buyback scheme. Public opinion was mixed, but the number of deaths and mass shootings has dropped dramatically since then, and the country's strict gun policy is often quoted as a success story for how to implement gun regulation. So if it has been so effective, why haven't more countries adopted a similar approach?
Yes,
A
my
lot
thoughts
has to
exactly.
do with the country's gun culture and whether gun ownership is seen as a privilege or a right.
You know, a big problem with the...
That's a big thing here, because in the last video we saw, it was like they told us, like, in Australia guns are considered a privilege, as where in the US they're considered a right. And so that difference, and like they said, like she said, the difference in gun culture are absolutely huge differences from Australia to the US. Keep going though.
US is they have this cultural and legal concept that it's okay for people to have guns for self-defense, and that in other industrialized countries is not really part of the legal or social context.
Rebecca Peters is one of the world's leading gun control experts, and she helped lead the national campaign to reform Australia's gun laws after Port Arthur.
The thing you have to try to keep in mind is what's going to have the greatest impact in terms of reducing the number of people injured and killed by guns.
There are an estimated 857 million civilian-held firearms in the world. It's hard to know for sure what the exact number is, but it's an increase of more than 200 million firearms compared to a decade before that.
God,
and the majority of those guns are in the United States. When you
300, we have almost half of the guns in the entire world, in civilians, in the entire world. Our country has almost half of the guns. We have almost as much guns as the rest of the world combined. Is that not insane? Like, is that not wild? Wow.
adjust for population size, it also has the most guns per capita. It's a stark difference compared to other developed countries. And the US also has a lot more firearm violence. The thing is, while we mainly hear about mass shootings, when you start categorizing gun deaths, the vast number of them are actually suicides.
Whether it's an attack on another person or an attack, or an attempt against your own life, the thing about a gun is it's very not negotiable.
So does more guns mean more more deaths? Studies have found a correlation between gun ownership and gun violence, but you have to look a bit deeper than that. Take Finland, for example. Rates of gun ownership in the country are high, but the rate of gun homicide is relatively quite low.
Oh, wow.
Why is that?
The big difference between Finland and the US is that in Finland, people own shotguns for hunting because Finland is a big hunting country, and they do have a lot of shotguns, but they do not have a lot of handguns.
It's not only about the number of guns.
So you can get you can get your hands on machine guns. You can get your hand on all of these things here in the U.S., which I find crazy. I'm not saying like ban guns because I know that'll never happen here, but you don't need a automatic weapon. You know what I'm saying? Like you don't need a machine gun, bro. Like I don't know what you would need that for as a civilian. And so I feel like you should not be able to get your hands on a machine gun. But keep it rolling.
But the types of guns as well. In the UK, semi-automatics were banned and registration was mandatory for shotguns after the 1987 Hungerford massacre. But it took it a step further after the Dunblane massacre in 1996, banning the private ownership of handguns. If you look at Australia, the number of guns now is actually around the same number as what there was around the time the gun buyback took place.
I heard about that. Yeah,
but the rate of gun violence is also much lower.
That's because the types of guns that are available, semi-automatics, are not available. And also because the new rules have changed the distribution of who owns guns.
So what does it take to own a gun? Depending on where you live, it could take a few months or just a few hours. In Australia, you need both a license and a permit. To get the license, you need to, among other things, give a genuine reason for having a firearm. And no, personal protection won't cut it. You also need to apply for a permit for every firearm and to register it. A key part of the laws is the waiting period. Even after you've done all the paperwork, you need to wait at least 28 days before you can do anything more. New Zealand also requires you to apply for a license, which involves a long vetting process. An interesting element of their laws is that, as part of the process, authorities will get in touch with someone close to you.
And that's especially important.
That's what I'm saying, bro. Like I said, I don't think banning guns is even a possibility, so I've never stood behind that. But stricter gun laws, make it harder for people to get guns. Know what I'm saying? Make them have to go through a more thorough process before they can get their hands on a gun. And I feel like a lot of countries have these long processes that people have to go through to get their hands on a gun. And we just don't have that process. But again, it goes back to the beginning where it's whereas I feel like a lot of other countries look at gun ownership as a privilege, whereas in America it's looked at as a right.
Important when you think about domestic violence, because the people who are perhaps best placed to say something about whether it's a good idea for that person to have a gun or not is often the people who've been their wife, their girlfriend, or their partner.
Both Britain and Canada have similar laws where, again, you must provide a reason for owning a firearm and character references, as well as go through a background check. One country with very little gun violence is Japan. They still have guns around, about 380,000 of them in fact. It's just really hard to get one. First, you take a firearm class and pass a written exam, doctor's note, apply for a permit to take firing training, pass a review of your criminal history, and apply for a gun.
Yes.
Gunpowder permit, take a one-day training class, from a gun dealer, allow the police to inspect your gun.
Yes. Bro, I agree with every single one of those steps. I legit agree with every single one of those steps. I feel like you should definitely have to pass every single one of those steps before being able to obtain a gun. For sure.
Gun ammunition, not buy a gun. Look, you get the point. It's hard to argue with the results. From 2010 to 2014, in a country of more than 125 million people, there were less than 40 gun homicides. That's about the same number the US had every 30 hours in 2014. And that could be because the country has the loosest gun laws in the developed world. In general, you just have to pass a basic background check, though some states do have stricter laws. One of the reasons gun laws in the US have remained the way they have is because of a uniquely American factor, the National Rifle Association. And it's not that people aren't in support of stricter gun laws. In fact, many gun owners in the US support stronger bans and universal background checks.
Yes.
The problem is, because voting isn't compulsory, these opinions don't mean anything unless you can rally people to vote.
Facts.
The NRA are a powerful voice when it comes to voting, providing
Facts.
guides which grade and endorse certain political candidates, which means candidates find themselves trying to please the powerful gun lobby, sometimes going into weird lengths. No, seriously.
Yup. I mean, here in America, it's about profit. Everything is centered around profit, and the NRA throwing big money and big bucks at the candidates that they want to win, or the candidates who are in power. You know what I'm saying? And 90% of the world could want something, but if those top 10% or 90% of the U.S. could want something, but if those top 10%, that rich top 10% who have all the money, they're gonna get their way. Simple and plain.
Machine gun bacon.
It's one part of the US's distinct legal environment. The country acknowledges the legal right to own a gun through the Second Amendment, and just passing a stronger nationwide gun law through Congress is hard. For a bill to become federal law, you have to go through their bicameral system. This is similar to a lot of other countries. It gets more complicated though. In the US, you also need the president to sign off on it. Basically, this means that without majority support, there are plenty of points in the process for the bill to be defeated. Whereas in New Zealand, their parliamentary system is unicameral. This means the government of the day controls the agenda with little obstruction, so it's a lot easier for laws to be created. At the end of the day, while the restrictions and buyback in Australia pulled most firearms out of circulation, it hasn't eliminated all gun violence. And the experience of countries like Britain and Japan wouldn't necessarily work in a country such as the USA because of cultural and political differences. But the stats are pretty clear that stronger gun reforms, no matter how strict, can make a difference.
There are bad people who decide to do bad things, but the thing is to design laws that make it much more difficult for the criminal to follow through with that plan.
Thank you. Thank you. That's all we got. You guys got a favorite video suggestion? You can subscribe to Patreon or drop it in the comment section. It's your boy D Neal. Out.